again. It's a delight to be here, and it's a delight to see you. I've been a Unitarian almost 50 years now, so I feel comfortable in Unitarian groups because we live our life on a daily basis the best we can, as does everyone. But we want to reflect this morning on hope and where we can find it. It is with humility that I talk with you this morning. I don't know that I will offer a lot, but hopefully there will be something that'll give you some hope. What is hope? I chose today's topic because our immediate future as a nation of free people has the potential to be unlike anything that we have witnessed in our lifetime. Since the presidential election of 2016, there is a palpable sense of apprehension about our individual as well as our collective future. There is fear and insecurity among many of our populace. However, if we stay frozen in our fear, frozen in our dismay, frozen in our disbelief, we've already lost. It's okay to stay frozen for a while, but we need to thaw out. And running around, and I've done it, saying the sky is falling, it's going to fall. That works for a while, but all we do is twirl in place. It doesn't get us anywhere. So what do we do? Where do we begin? This isn't the first crisis you've been in. We've each had things in our lives. We survived it. We're here. So we have tools. But on the night of November 8th, 2016, I was in disbelief. How could this happen? How am I going to fix it? Well, how can I fix something when I don't even know what happened? Then I walked through our house, and over one of the main hallways for years has been a sign, and I'll read it to you because you probably can't see it. It says, "It is what it is." This was given to us by a former member of this church, Marge Doty. She and her partner, or actually they're married now, live in Florida. It is what it is. And I'll hang this up to remind us this morning. Can't run away. Reality's there. So what are we going to do? I'm a very practical person. I like discussing philosophy and various approaches to spirituality, but I'm very practical. Growing up in the mountains, living in a farm area, you solve your problems. So, I suggest this morning we build a toolbox. I will offer you some tools that are very old, going back 5,000 or 6,000 years. And then I will offer you some tools that might be new. Build your own toolbox. Sometimes we have to whack it with a hammer. Sometimes it will require something more delicate, a delicate tool. But build your own toolbox. Why? Because negativity, living in dismay, living in despair, makes us sick, makes us non-productive. Our cells are listening. Being a physical therapist forever, seems ever, almost 50 years, and a yoga teacher for 30 years, I saw face to face, time after time, if we're living in negativity, our cells are listening. We get sick either psychologically or physically or both. So when I was in my despair and my dismay, I thought, well, I've been here before. I felt like I was in a dark hole. Well, it's okay to sit in the dark hole for a while. Nobody bothers you. You don't have to talk to anybody. So soon, though, we look up from that dark hole and we see the light. And I've always been one of those that says, okay, what have I got? I can yell and have somebody throw down a rope, help me crawl out. Or I can look for stuff to build a ladder out of this dark place that I am. How do I do that? And I realize something I knew, something that I'd used for living life for almost 50 years. And that was something I bought into, and that's the Unitarian Universalist principles. Now, you have those principles on the front of your program. And I want us to read them together, listening to the words. These aren't new to you. Does everybody have a program? No. Okay. Okay, do you have one you can look off of? I will read an introductory paragraph that's not on there. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the following. And we'll read together. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement in spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregation and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Even before you knew about Unitarian Universalists, you held many of those principles in your heart. We learned them. We learned them from our parents. We learned them in churches wherever we come from. I wasn't born a Unitarian. I was a Southern Baptist growing up on Main Street in Abington, and I went to Vacation Bible School, and I went to church every Sunday. These principles are broad. They happen to be articulated very clearly by the Unitarian Universalists. So I asked myself as I read these, why am I so distraught? Because I felt my soul was torn. It was torn. And before I can heal anything, I have to find out, why did it tear? And when I looked at it, I found that the first principle was most abused during the campaign. And that was, and still is, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. When a candidate makes fun of a disabled reporter, when a candidate happily talks about groping women, when a candidate singles out a particular religion in total, in this case Muslim, to say, we don't want you. When a candidate singles out brown-skinned people from a particular country called Mexico and labels them murderers and rapists. When a candidate makes fun of a U.S. Senator, in this case John McCain, because he was a prisoner of war and was tortured in Vietnam. This tears my soul. And it takes a while to recover from that rhetoric, particularly when it doesn't get the response that I expected from people in general. But there's something deeper, which I won't totally cover this morning. And because I'm still figuring it out, we all are. One of the things I want us to do is remind ourselves how we go back to ourself, our core being. We're good. We're actually all mixtures of good and bad. What I saw in the campaign, and you've seen it in work in other places, there are people who appeal to our bad side. There are people who are negative, and if we sit in that negativity, we can too become negative. So what I want us to do, and I'll just remind us of something that's actually 5,000 to 6,000 years old. You've done it in various capacities, and that's simply go within. Rediscover and affirm your being. But in order to do that, and I'll talk about the magic of doing this later. Magic because I can't explain it, but it's there. That is becoming quiet. Cutting out the noise. Cutting out the clutter. Cutting out the thoughts. Becoming quiet because that's going into the quiet because that's where hope resides. That's where your wisdom resides. So, for a moment, let's together, and I'll only do this 1 to 2 minutes. And there was a recent speaker just 2 or 3 weeks ago that did one of these techniques with you. Today, we're going to use something you always have. As long as we're on this earth, we're going to be doing this part. And we don't even have to plan on it. We don't have to write a note about it. And that's breathe. We always have our breath. And if you're in the hottest fire of a problem, whether it's what we're facing nationally, internationally, or whether it's something that occurs tomorrow, you have your breath. So, for the next minute, I'll lead you through this. And because I know our brains love to, if a thought comes, pay attention to my voice. I will talk during this time. The goal eventually is just go into quiet, but I'll be talking. Have your brain pay attention to my voice in what I ask you to do, which is simple, breathe. But if a thought comes, and this is what you do. Thoughts are like undisciplined kids. They run in and get your attention, pull on you. Say, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. But for right now, this is my time. My time. So, if you will, put both feet on the floor if you're tall enough to reach the floor. If you do this at home, put a stool under some books or whatever. It's important to have contact with the earth. The earth, Gaia, is very important. It is very powerful. All we have to do is stay connected. Now, you can gently let your hands rest on your thighs or together. Whatever is comfortable. Look gently down toward the floor or let your eyes close for the next minute. Feel the contact with the floor. Feel your spine erect, your ears up over your shoulders. Breathing gently in and breathing gently out. Have your mind pay attention to that breath. Breathe in light and peace and hope. And breathe out the fear, the concern. Breathing in and breathing out. Now on our next breath, breathe in and hold. Hold in that space of utter quiet, utter silence, peace, and then let it flow out. One more time, breathing in and hold. Hold, breathe in peace and hope, and out the fear. And at your own rate, paying attention, have the brain concentrate on that breath. The rise of the chest, breathing in and breathing out at your own pace. Know that this breath can wash away, cleanse, give you peace, and reconnect to who you are. One more breath, breathe in and breathe out. Peace and hope. So be it. And now gently open your eyes. Know that you can do this technique, and you've learned others in your various travels. Know that you can do this technique anywhere, in a meeting. Probably not close your eyes, just stare at something. But disconnect. If the clutter is too much, if the information is too much, let it go. Go within, and why? Why has this been handed down 5,000 to 6,000 years through the Eastern traditions, primarily? It's because there's where we remember who we are. We remember that person we are, and that person has good and positivity. And we anchor and we center. We have to be a tree like an oak that anchors so that we can weather the storms. The reed, anchored by the riverbank, is anchored, but it sways with the flow of that river. And that's what we will need to do. We need to be flexible. And in the search for truth and meaning, we pick up various tools that we can use. When we're looking how to heal a torn scar, particularly on our soul, we've all had things throughout our lives that we particularly like because it seems to help us. And one for me that I'll mention that some of you may be familiar with. That is the Serenity Prayer. The Serenity Prayer is part of Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. And I'll share it with you per Unitarian. I change it so it resonates in my head. But this is the Serenity Prayer. And it has helped me. And I post things on my cabinets and on mirrors so that I am reminded. May I read this to you? May I change those things that I can change. May I accept those things that I cannot change. And may I have the wisdom to know the difference. May I have the wisdom to know the difference. This reminds me of an ancient Vedic spiritual law that has been brought into modern terminology by a number of people, one being Deepak Chopra. But it is the law of detached involvement. And when I first heard that, I thought, what do you mean, detached involvement? I'm either involved or I'm not. Well, it suddenly occurred to me in looking at this Serenity Prayer, may I accept those things I cannot change. That is a detached involvement. I know Trump is tweeting. Can I change it? Nah. I know Congress is meeting and talking about something very dear to my heart, being in healthcare almost 50 years, the Affordable Care Act. Can I change their discussions? Not actually. But the rest of that spiritual law coming from the ancient Vedas is this: be willing to look for the wisdom or accept that there is wisdom in uncertainty. And a footnote to that is we actually don't control everything. Wonderful things can happen. An ancient Vedic spiritual law is there is wisdom in uncertainty. And why? Why? Because there becomes infinite possibilities, things that I would never think about. Infinite interactions that occur. And why? Because in the ancient Vedic way of saying, there is a creative dance going on. A creative dance of the universe that will present to you infinite possibilities. So in our search for truth and meaning, one of our UU principles, truth and meaning comes from various corners of the world. Another thing that I carried in my billfold until it just was worn to shreds was a statement by our former president, Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "Do what you can, where you are with what you have. That's good enough. And if a president said that, I think I can apply that to the ins and outs of my life. Do what you can where you are with what you have. Why is going within so very important that it's been handed down through various traditions? Prayer in our Christian churches, quiet. Why is the sitting on a riverbank watching a golden eagle soar? Why does that seem spiritual? Because it connects us with an interdependent web of life, another of our principles. The web is always there, the life web is always there. And by going within and becoming silent, that magic that I talked about, you don't work on it, it happens. You're sitting quietly in a room, lying down, whatever, and suddenly, you're on the grid of the interdependent web of life. And why is that important? Because you support that web by being there. Your goodness, your soul being supports that web. But without even asking, the web supports you. It is a magical place. Many of you have been there. You don't have to go into deep meditation. You go into quiet. People can do that in a cathedral or by a river or out in the backyard. The web is there, ready to be touched. So let it support you and let it teach you wisdom. So let me share with you something about recently regarding this topic, how the web, the interdependent web, whispered to me unexpectedly. I didn't have to think on it or read a book. It just happened. On the night of November 8th, 2016, election night, I went to bed early. I saw how it was going, and all of the people with their whiteboards were breathless, figuring this thing out, saying, it can't be, yes it can. So I went to bed, and in that wise time of half asleep, half awake, I decided something. And I was serious. I decided that I would never get out of bed again. I was just going to stay there and let you all handle it. That seemed the appropriate thing to do in the middle of the night. I was going to disengage from life. Luckily, I had to get up the next morning. I had to be somewhere at 10:30. So, I got up, I went, and I needed to be at Barter at stage 2 because I was part of a talkback. So I showed up. And as I walked, usually Barter and plays, it's very busy. I was not needing to get there early. So I got there right at playtime. I walked up the hill to stage 2, and I turned around. It was a bright, crisp November morning. It was lovely. And I looked down, and Main Street in Abingdon was perfectly vacant. Not a person, not a car. And it was quiet. And into that quiet I stood for a moment, and it occurred to me, this is November 9th. There are no military tanks on the streets of Abingdon. There are no soldiers with guns marching down our street. And it hit me. Oh, this is what is meant by the peaceful transfer of power. I had not realized that, how profound that was. Across the country, that was true. And in other countries, that does not necessarily happen. So I walked on into the theater, and by that time the audience was all seated. 10:30, this was a performance for 4th and 5th graders. And these little 4th and 5th graders had come from Tazewell County and had been riding on a bus for a little over an hour. And they were in their seats. And I took my place up high in the theater and over to the side. So when I looked out, I could see their faces, all of them. Much to my surprise, that's how we get in our own being. I didn't see one little face that was scared looking or depressed looking, had anxiety. They were there for a play, and they had ridden the bus for an hour. Being in the moment, being in the now, seeing what we have right in front of us. So we went through the first act and into intermission. And at intermission, everybody was quiet, and there was a little 4th grader not far from me. A little girl said, "Wow, that was an hour, and it just went by really fast. I learned something in that. Did you?" And I said, "Yes." Guess what the play was? It was a play about how women got the vote. How timely. She said, "I didn't know it took so much to give us the vote. That's hard work." And then the talk went on to what they had ordered at McDonald's for lunch to eat on the way back. So, in the moment, lots of times we can learn great lessons, and it just happens. But we have to be listening, and we have to be awake. We can't be in our clutter of information. Be in the now. We have to hear the lesson. So, we know we each have our individual life journeys. Thank goodness. It'd be terrible if there was only one path for living, one path for our spirituality. That would be boring. And we wouldn't get all the answers. The hills and valleys, in the broader spiritual sense, the hills and valleys that we experience, even this one that we're experiencing as a nation, even with apprehension, hills and valleys provide us with an opening. In the Vedic literatures, it's an opening for the raising, the elevation of our soul's consciousness. Problems teach us if we're awake and if we listen, because we have the skills. You have your own toolbox. We have the skills. There's one new tool that I developed during this desperate time that I had a few times back, and that is we have too much information. Years ago, mid-70s, when I was finishing my dissertation, was looking at how do we design a proper physical therapy curriculum for now and for the future. And one of the things, and it dawned on me, that I put as the first and foremost was how would our students decide what was merely information and clutter and what was actually worthwhile. We have more information in our pocket with our smartphones than our grandparents had. But it can be a problem. We've heard about fake news, and we can get drawn and addicted to any information. So I developed a gauge. And the gauge is simple. It's like a compass. It points up, it's got an arrow on it, and this is neutral. And I ask myself, is my being in neutral? This is positive. Am I feeling, yes. Is this experience or what I'm reading or hearing putting me here? Positive. So when I hear something on TV, we have relentless 24/7 news if we choose to do that. Do I feel myself tilting into the negative? Well, I have power there. And if I haven't healed enough to hear that, I turn that TV off or I throw that article down. Those pundits, those reporters don't have control on my positive and negativity. I have the power to turn it off because I know how to come back to center and I know how to go to positive. We have things and we know what heals our souls. So control that noise. We have too much of it. And why? Remember why. We can't always keep out of the negative. Life's life. Remember why. Our cells are listening. Every cell in our body is listening. We know from Candace Perk years ago, she was able at NIH to document that our emotions are not just in one section of our brain, it's in every cell. That fear I had as a child, that happiness I had, it came to every cell. The cells are listening, and for your personal health, both psychologically and physically, choose to be, at least in the neutral and positive, and when we're stronger, if we want to read some of the things that make us, we can, but we don't have to. One of the things just happened to turn it on. I don't usually watch late night shows, but Bob and I were watching Colbert because we had heard Joe Biden was going to be on, and he's one of my, just like a favorite uncle. But he happened to be our vice president, and we wanted to listen to good old Joe. And Joe said something where I truly began to heal. It was simple. And it was like salve to my soul. And it was actually talking about a letter that was sent to Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, during a very difficult time government-wise. And it said this, and we were all concerned about our democracy, and it was about how to maintain democracy, which again we read in our UU principles. And it said, there are two things that are overridingly important in a democracy. Hold to these two things, and you will weather the storm. Number one, and above all, take care of all the people. Take care of all the people. Number two, if a person has power, do not in any way let that person abuse that power. Period. That's a democracy. Does it take work? Yes, it does.